Last night was the first debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden for all the marbles, for the Oval Office, for the presidency. And man, oh man, what a slugfest this was. It was hard to watch. It was uncomfortable. It was exhausting. People felt actual, literal, physical, and mental fatigue after watching this 2-hour beatdown. I mean, it was one of the most partisan things I've ever seen. It was dirty, it was rough, it was unpleasant, very, very unpleasant. I don't think there's ever been a presidential debate quite this aggressive, quite this filthy, and it just goes to show the deep divide, the deep political divide in the United States right now between conservatives and liberals, and it was also eye-opening in quite a few ways as well. There were a lot of things that were predictable about the debate and a lot of things that were kind of shocking when you really think about it, especially on the Joe Biden side. Now, I realize that this is a conservative podcast and we're going to be harder on Joe Biden than we are on Donald Trump. Donald Trump deserves a lot of flack, too, for last night. But let's get into it and find out exactly, what both guys did right and what both guys did wrong. There's very little that both of them did right, but for different reasons. So let's focus on Donald Trump first. So what Donald Trump did was basically come at Joe Biden like a wrecking ball. Now, in the past, this has worked in his favor because voters like this about Trump. He likes that he walks into the establishment, the political establishment, and turns it upside down on its head and suplexes it from the turnbuckle. And that's pretty much what happened last night. However, it didn't work in Trump's favor because this is a presidential debate with a lot of weight behind it. This is not 2016, where Trump was going up against Hillary Clinton, who was a very, very unlikable candidate. People did not like Hillary Clinton. The more they see of Hillary Clinton, the less they like her. She is a very unpleasant, unscrupulous character, especially with all this news coming out that she was probably the one who orchestrated the whole kickoff to the Mueller investigation and the Russian collusion hoax. For all intents and purposes, she's a very evil woman, and I think a lot of people understand how evil she is. Joe Biden is different. Joe Biden is just corrupt. He's just corrupt. And if you look at last night, the way that he behaved, there's a reason why Trump went after him so hard. But Trump did it in the worst possible way. He talked over him. He interrupted him. Chris Wallace, the moderator, would try to intervene. He would talk over him. He would start attacking Chris Wallace. It soon turned into a three-way slugfest instead of a back and forth. Neither one of them respected the other's time. They interjected, they interrupted, so it wasn't good. The problem Trump made is that he didn't pick his battles. And this is a classic problem with Trump. When you criticize him, he has a tendency to sort of leap right into the fray and go on the attack. Sometimes it's far better to let your opposition say a bunch of things, even if they're not true, even if they're full-blown lies. And let me tell you something, Joe Biden told tons of lies last night, tons of lies. Some of them filthy and dirty ones. And might I add, debunked ones. It didn't really matter, though. Like, Trump could have let him talk, could have let him build his case, and then deflated him right after by saying, okay, now it's my turn. Instead, he kind of leaped in. That's a lie. This is a lie. And you're an idiot. And you're this and that. And it was a mess. It was a complete mess. In contrast, Joe Biden was a lot different. He behaved 100% typical Joe Biden, which is to say, when he's being thrown softball questions from the leftist media that tries to run defense for him, he has a hard time even keeping that together. Last night, the expectation was that he would fall on his face. And he would start, lose his train of thought. And that happened a few times, but not to the degree that we've seen in just normal TV interviews. So he must have been jazzed up for it. I don't know what. There's reports that he's been taking drugs and all this. I don't know, and I don't care. I don't think that whether he took drugs or not has any effect on the man himself, on his character and on his message. And his message, quite frankly, was crap. Joe Biden's message last night was sheer and utter crap. This is a man who, when pressed with actual hard questions for the first time in a long time, he did what he does all the time. He deflects. If you look at Joe Biden's history with hard questions, he has a tendency to nearly always say, well, why are we talking about that, man? Why don't we talk about Trump? Why don't we talk about this president right now? He doesn't like hard questions because he can't answer them. When he's forced to go off script, he doesn't do so well. So he sticks to his predefined list of attacks, and he hopes that that'll be enough. And I'm sorry, last night it really wasn't enough. It really wasn't enough. I mean, Donald Trump pressed him on several things. He said, are you pro-law enforcement? Will you say that you stand with the police? Joe Biden wouldn't say it. It took him a long time. And then finally he's like, yeah, I stand with law enforcement, but we need to do this and we need to do that and we need to reform it. And there's got to be justice for everyone. And there is justice for everyone. The U.S. law enforcement situation is not as bad as people think. It definitely needs an overhaul. It doesn't need to be defunded, but it does need to be reformed. There's lots of ways that we can make the system better than it is right now. But Joe Biden basically came out and said that the police force is completely broken. And he wouldn't, it took him, he had to struggle to say, well, yeah, I'm for the cops, which of course he isn't. He's not for the cops. He's not for the cops. There's a reason why all these police unions are backing Trump right now. And you'll see a lot of that. You'll see a lot of the boys in blue voting for Trump in November, and that's not a big surprise. I mean, last night President Trump actually challenged Joe Biden outright. He says, "Name me one law enforcement organization that is behind you." He couldn't do it, and Trump, to his credit, kept pressing him. Like, just one, Joe, just one. Why can't you name one? Why can't you name one? Excellent line of attack. Joe Biden had nothing because guess what? Law enforcement agencies are not behind Democrats right now. They have all flipped red. Nearly all of them have flipped red. They're going to be voting for Trump. So that was an excellent attack last night by Donald Trump, and one of his best. I think that was one of his hardest hitting punches, and I think that it did a lot of damage to Joe Biden and reminded everyone that, hey, you know what? Republicans are the party of law enforcement. They're not the party of anarchy and leftist tyranny. They aren't. So that was a good showing by Donald Trump. Trump also pressed him on a few other things too. He pressed him on healthcare. That didn't work out so well. Chris Wallace tried to press him on whether or not he would pack the courts. There's this whole thing that the Democrats are going to pack the courts as a sort of a revenge tactic for putting Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court. Chris Wallace asked him quite plainly, "Are you going to do it?" He wouldn't answer the question. Trump pressed him on riots. He's like, "Have you ever called for a de-escalation in violence in rioting? Have you ever reached out to the mayors of these Democrat-run cities?" And Joe Biden's response was, "Well, I'm not in charge," which is a hell of a thing to say when you're running for president, and you're visiting places like Kenosha, and you're going in and instead of meeting with your constituents whose businesses and homes were burned to the ground and who lost everything, you go and you visit Jacob Blake's family, a guy who has multiple felonies under his belt, had multiple outstanding warrants at the time that he was shot, and was harassing a woman who he had raped before, with her child in the bed with her. I mean, it's ugly stuff. It really, really is. Trump also pressed Biden on the Green New Deal initiatives. And he actually succeeded here. He forced Joe Biden to say, no, I don't support the Green New Deal, which is not going to win him any favors with his fellow Democrats. For those who don't know, the Democratic Party right now is split down the middle. They have no unified message. There's a lot of infighting inside the Democratic Party, and the only glue that's holding them together, school glue as it is this shared hatred of Trump. Now, is that going to be enough to win the election? It's possible, but is it a good strategy moving forward? No, because when Trump is gone, what then? What happens when Trump is gone and Biden's in the Oval Office for 6 months? Until Kamala Harris takes over, which she will. I mean, it's not a recipe for long-term success, and this has been the Democrats' problem dating all the way back to 2015. The election at the time was 1 year out. Did they have a good plan for moving forward? Not really. So now we're stuck in this sort of cycle where both sides are going to go fully on the attack for completely different reasons. And like I said, it was an ugly debate. There was nothing pleasant about watching last night's debate. It was irritating watching Trump constantly interrupt. I think everyone agrees with that. But was he wrong? No. I mean, Trump made some excellent points. He came out swinging, and he had Joe Biden on the ropes. He really did. It's just that the fight was so drawn out and so ugly that people just got really, really sick of it. Now, is this going to change anyone's mind? Probably not, and that's the point. I mean, we're 34 days, I think, out from the election now. Is it really going to matter? Is it really going to sway people's votes? People who are going to vote for Trump, are they suddenly going to say, well, that was awful, I'm going to change my vote? Of course not. They're not going to do that. Same thing with Biden. I don't think that anyone in the Biden camp is really having a change of heart right now, even though Biden lost. He lost the debate last night. He really, really did. He was not good. But the real issue here is centrist voters, independents. What do they make of last night? Now, for those who aren't politically minded, for those who just kind of come home and like, well, geez, I wonder who's going to be president in the next month, it's hard to tell. I mean, if I was a centrist voter who didn't know a lot about politics, I would have looked at last night and said, I'm not going to vote for either of these guys. But because I'm politically minded, if I was a centrist, I would probably say, well, Joe Biden really didn't answer anything. He didn't answer a single question. He sort of he does this routine all the time where he sort of has a pre-scripted answer, and if someone tries to catch him on something, he just deflects. You know, that's the classic, I don't want to talk about that. Why aren't we talking about this? Why aren't we talking about that person? Why aren't we talking about this instead? He does this all the time. He's even done it with his constituents on the campaign trail. You'll see this a lot. When one of his voters asks him a valid question about his policies or whatever, if it's something Joe Biden doesn't like, he gets very incensed. He gets very angry. Let's take it outside, and he calls him fatty, and he does all these horrible things. And he did it last night too when he lied. Oh, Trump called our soldiers losers and all this, which there's no evidence that Donald Trump ever called our military losers. Ever. In fact, there's I think 20 people who came out and were like, no, that's not a thing that Donald Trump has ever said. Then he lies, and he says, Donald Trump comes back and he says, there's video of you saying that, calling our military stupid bastards. This is true. There's actual video of Joe Biden saying this. Now, the context of whether or not Joe Biden was kidding or not, that's up in the air. However, if you look at that video and you look at the soldiers in the background, they don't look too impressed. I mean, they're not laughing with Joe Biden. They're not like, ha, Joe Biden, yeah, that's funny. No, they kind of look uncomfortable. And Joe Biden actually looks very aggressive. And this is the lying dog-faced pony soldier routine all over again. So Joe Biden lied and he lied and he lied. Then things got worse. Then things got even worse because Chris Wallace decided that he was going to switch from being a moderator to being a third debate opponent, running alongside Joe Biden. Now, I've said for a long time that Chris Wallace is not a good moderator and he's not an honest host. I mean, he's on Fox News and everyone assumes that he's on the right. I don't believe that this is true. Chris Wallace has a notoriously bad habit of positing questions to people that have already been debunked. He did this a few weeks ago when he had a sit down with Donald Trump, and he brought up a few things which they were old news and they were debunked, and he did it again last night. And it's not a good thing. Then he went on the attack against Trump, and whenever Biden would say something and Trump would interrupt, he would silence Trump. But then when Trump would try to answer a question, Chris Wallace would interrupt him. It was almost like he was trying to downplay everything Trump said and then bolster up Joe Biden while still trying to give the illusion that he was tossing Biden tough questions. Now, he did actually give Biden a series of tough questions, but then he would sort of throw himself into the mix and try to run defense for him. It was an odd thing to see. Odd, but not entirely unexpected. And this is why I don't like Chris Wallace. I don't think Chris Wallace is an honest host. Now, you could argue that, you need a little bit of pushback against Donald Trump. But when we're talking about things that are factual versus non-factual, for instance, Charlottesville, the good people on both sides argument, Chris Wallace tried this routine. He actually comes out and he says, Mr. President, are you going to condemn white nationalists and hate groups? Now, this is old news. Donald Trump did this 2 years ago after Charlottesville happened. I mean, he already did this. The fake news media, they cut out the part where Trump literally says, after he said the good people on both sides thing, he says, and I'm not talking about the white nationalists or the neo-Nazis, they should be condemned totally. That is a note-for-note verbatim quote. Now, the media have completely ignored that because obviously it would mean that Donald Trump is not, in fact, a racist. Now, in the same breath last night, Donald Trump says, are you going to condemn Antifa? What does Joe Biden say? That's not an organization. Antifa is not an organization, which is astonishing. It's an astonishing lie. But it's, once again, it goes back to this whole Democrat thing of ignoring everything that's going on in Democrat-run cities right now. 100 plus days of straight rioting, pushed primarily by Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And Joe Biden says that Antifa is not a real organization. Well, guess what, Joe? Antifa is a real organization. They are worldwide. They have a website. They have a charter. They have a list of things that they want to accomplish, and they're not good. And they ain't your friend. Donald Trump brought this up last night. He says you're going to start courting these radical left elements. Be careful because they're going to turn on you. They're going to turn on you. And he's right about that. I mean, Antifa is no friend of Joe Biden. They see Biden as a means to an end, just like a lot of people on the radical left see Biden as a means to an end. And this is the thing that irritates me, is that this is not a presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Donald Trump should have said, you know what, Joe, you're not the candidate. Kamala Harris is the candidate, and I should be debating her because, you know what, in 6 months, when either you A, die, or B, your handlers kind of remove you from office because you can't remember where you left your keys, Kamala Harris is going to be president. This is the real danger here. It's like they tried to pin this as, like, vote for me because I'm Joe Biden and I'm not going to be like Donald Trump. No, you're going to be Kamala Harris. That's how this is going to go. That's why I'm much more interested in next week's debate when Kamala Harris goes up against Mike Pence. Because Mike Pence is a much more eloquent speaker. He knows the game. He's had skin in the game for a very long time. He knows what he's doing, and he's better at reporting facts. Whereas Trump is sort of like a bulldozer. Like, Trump can make some excellent points, and he made a ton of excellent points last night. He just did it in the worst way possible. And it didn't work in his favor. It really didn't. I mean, it didn't work in anyone's favor. Everyone walked away a loser last night. Chris Wallace looked awful. He got ripped up and down for appearing partisan, which he was. Donald Trump got ripped up and down for being a belligerent blowhard, which he was. And Joe Biden got ripped up and down for, again, not answering a single question and just dodging and dodging and dodging. So it was ugly. It was ugly. And it was a reflection on our current state of politics. And that's not a good reflection. Because it does show the deep divide going on right now between Democrats and Republicans. It shows why they can't work together. It shows why Democrats are stymieing bills, COVID relief bills, because Republicans won't push Green New Deal initiatives and all this other nonsense. It's ugly. It's ugly. But I think Trump did land some extremely good hits last night. I just wish he would have done it in a better manner. But again, is that enough to really sway people's votes? No, of course not, because everyone knows that Donald Trump is like this. Now, last night, I would say he was probably at his worst. I've never seen Donald Trump at his worst. But at least he came out swinging with some good hits. At least it wasn't just, Joe, you're old and you're senile and you can't do this and you can't do that. I mean, he got his jabs in, but he didn't run his entire attack on it, which was good. He brought up Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden forgot which son he was talking about, and that was awkward. I'm talking about Beau, and then Donald Trump's like, well, I'm not talking about Beau. I don't know anything about Beau. I'm talking about Hunter Biden. And he pressed him repeatedly on his taking of $3.5 million, I believe it was, from the mayor of Moscow. Like, that's a good counter argument at a time when the Russian collusion narrative has completely fallen apart. And more evidence is emerging day in and day out that this thing was an orchestrated attempt by Democrats in the Hillary Clinton campaign and the FBI to take down a sitting president, an incoming sitting president. It's an ugly thing. So I'm glad Trump pushed back on that, and I'm glad he came at him hard, because it left Joe Biden nowhere to go. And what did Biden do? Once again, well, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. And why are we talking about this, and why don't we talk about something else? I mean, Biden's going to have to do better, because he's not going to last in the next debate. He's already made it clear that he wants to have this next debate. I'm not sure how many people are going to tune in. I'm going to tune in for the Harris-Pence debate, because I think that's going to be a much more telling debate. But am I going to tune in for the last one? Yeah, because I'm going to report it and I'm going to do a podcast on it. But it was an ugly night. It wasn't a pleasant night. And I think everyone walked away from that feeling like they needed a shower. And a cold glass of cool spring mountain water. Because that was toxic. Not a lot of big revelations last night. Not a lot of minds were changed. I really don't think so. I think that this is going to sort of fizzle out in a week's time, just like it always does, because our news cycle's not that big. Like I said, I'm far more interested in Mike Pence going up against Kamala Harris, because Harris can't handle tough questions. She proved this on the campaign trail when she was running for president. She paints herself into too many corners and then she can't get out of them. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard tore her to shreds and single-handedly destroyed her campaign. As soon as Tulsi Gabbard went after Kamala Harris, her presidential numbers plummeted, and she was out of the race. So the fact that she's being Trojan horsed in by Joe Biden right now, I think that Pence had better put a lot of emphasis on the fact that Kamala Harris is going to be the president if Democrats win, and not Joe Biden. And that's not a good thing. And Pence should really concentrate on Harris's radicalism, her bailing out of rioters, some of whom were child molesters and who had criminal rap sheets as long as my arm. He should hone in on the fact that Kamala Harris was openly encouraging riots in the streets and saying they were a good thing and that they should continue. He should be pushing that quite hard. And then maybe we'll see some sort of a pushback. But I think that the narrative needs to shift here from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. That would be a good strategy 30 days out from the election, because we're running out of time. And those who haven't voted yet should know who's going to actually be president if Democrats win. Because Joe Biden ain't going to last 6 months before he's either poisoned. I mean, that might be a conspiracy theory, but it's a plausible one. Or he'll be forced to retire or step down because of cognitive decline or something else. But he ain't going to last out his first term. He'll be lucky if he lasts his first year. Kamala Harris will be president. Now, how much damage can she do in 4 years? Quite a lot. What happens after that, I'm not sure. I'm actually going to do a podcast on this tomorrow about what's going to happen if Kamala Harris becomes president, what I think will happen, and how long the Democrats will maintain power if they push this. There's a lot of scenarios that are floating around now. For now, last night's debate, again, was a disaster. It was horrible to watch. It was not fun. But at least Donald Trump did manage to land some solid blows and get people talking about the things that matter. Now, is any of this new? No. But for first-time viewers who are maybe a little bit curious about what the two had to say, this was possibly an eye-opener. So we'll see. The polls are going to reflect this. I mean, they can't be relied on 100%. Polls have been wrong, especially when in comparison to the polls of 2016. Trump is actually doing better than before. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's it for today. We'll see you next time on Republicans Pounce. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share, because I want this channel to grow. See you next time, and stay strong.